This is Larry Connors USA. Larry Connors USA.
Welcome back. My guest, as I was telling you in the preceding segment, Gordon G. Chang, columnist, author, lawyer. He has testified numerous times before the CIA, the National Intel Council, State Department, the Pentagon. And I asked him to join me based on a piece that had appeared in Epoch the other day by Jack Phillips. The Chinese regime has stolen enough data to compile a dossier on all Americans. That's according to a former official. Gordon G. Chang, glad to have you back on board, sir.
Thank you so much, Larry.
Well, when I want to go to a China expert, you're the first one that comes to mind. And one of the things I want to get into at that point is this statement from Jack Phillips in this article that the CCP, the Chinese Communist Party, has enough data on a dossier for every American adult, according to someone inside. Does that sound accurate? And if so, why?
It certainly sounds accurate. That statement was made by Matt Pottinger, who was Deputy National Security Advisor for President Trump. And he made that before the Senate Select Committee on Intelligence on the 4th of this month. And at the same time, there were other officials who were testifying. But China clearly has been, with great determination, stealing and collecting information about Americans. And as Pottinger said, we got to be concerned because they're using this to influence and intimidate Americans throughout politics, business, finance, all the rest of it, you name it.
You have, I know, and folks, if you could follow Gordon all the time at his Twitter account, and I certainly encourage you to do it because I do that. I have him on there on a constant basis at G. Gordon Twitter. Is that right, Gordon? I can't find it here quick enough. Did I get it right?
It's Gordon G. Chang.
Gordon G. Chang. I'm sorry. Of course, it's not Twitter. Gordon G. Chang. Thanks. Had it from me, but I had another piece of information I was trying to get. Based on that statement about that China has stolen this information and would use it against Americans, I mean, does that – I know they have a multi-game, long-game plan. Does that also tie back to the Chinese spy that was linked to Congressman Swalwell and others across the nation, and how many other little spies exist within our country right now doing the same?
Oh, there's got to be hundreds of Ministry of State Security officials and agents. The person you're referring to is Christine Fong. She first contacted Eric Swalwell, not when he was on the House Intel Committee, which, of course, he'd be of great value to China. She contacted him when he was a council member in Dublin City, California, which means that she can't have been the only Ministry of State Security agent. There must be dozens, hundreds of Christine Fongs, which means that the United States is really the subject of an unprecedented barrage from Beijing.
So that means that basically she picked the horse, and that horse went all the way to the finish line, getting into Congress. And on top of that, Nancy Pelosi putting him on the Intel Committee.
Yes, and there are a lot of horses that don't pan out for China, but it shows you how the comprehensive this effort has been. They just take people that they think are promising. Some of them work out like Swalwell, some of them don't. But this really is just an effort like we've never seen before.
Well, is it someone that they pick that they think might be, someone down the road, or do they also get involved and engaged in making sure they get to a higher step?
Well, probably both, but I think that for the most part, they don't really have that much influence on how voters decide things, but they just see people that they believe will one day become influential, and they invest. And I guess sometimes they try to influence others, but the point is they've got so many people out there that they're following. Because Swalwell was not the only person that Christine Fong had targeted.
Right.
She had targeted officials of both parties and in states other than California. Yeah,
some mayors in local, and we're told across the Midwest, but their names were never being revealed because there might have been a sexual liaison that might have upset a marriage or something. I don't know why they'd kept him out, but you're right. We don't know who all she had contact with and how far the information went. Again, you're listening to Gordon G. Chang, and I do encourage you to follow him on Twitter. Very easy to look him up and follow him on that because this is the way you can stay on top of what he's doing. on a constant basis. It's at Gordon G. Chang, Twitter, at Gordon G. Chang. I'm looking again to this Epic article that started all this. I see the former director of the National Counterintel Security Center said, in their opinion, the CCP, Communist Chinese Party, using a whole-of-country approach, like we were discussing, to, quote, leverage, infiltrate, influence, steal from every corner of U.S. success.
And that's exactly what they do. You know, Larry, we've got an open society, so a lot of this information is available, but China hoovers it all up. But they also have been stealing in unprecedented ways. So, for instance, in a slightly related matter, China steals hundreds of billions of dollars of U.S. intellectual property each year. We don't know exactly how much, but John Radcliffe, when he was Director of National Intelligence last December, put the number at almost $500 billion a year.
Well, I'm sorry, the number again? How much?
Almost $500 billion a year of U.S. intellectual property. Some people put the number less. Some people put it higher. But we're talking basically $500 billion a year.
We're also watching as to how they have been manipulating some of the currency markets, not just crypto, but anything they're doing that then has a ripple effect against crypto markets and other stocks that are traded more commonly, and oil and so forth. I mean, this whole country approach is the long game, as we said, and that is to rule the world at some point.
It is to rule the world, and in the interim, it's to overthrow the U.S. government. Last year, China was advocating violence on American streets. And, Larry, that goes beyond subversion. That's an act of war. And we have yet to impose costs on China for trying to overthrow our system of governance.
That brings me, of course, to the point that the recent cyber attacks that the Biden administration, of course, has put a lot of it at the feet of Russia. But you've said previously that China and Russia probably work together to some extent on this. But what are we doing to tell them and to punish them and to sanction them and get them back in line? Or what can or should we do?
Well, there's a lot that we can do, but the Biden administration has decided to do nothing. You know, to its credit, the White House, they attributed the Microsoft Exchange hack earlier this year to China. And they also actually said that Chinese criminals and the ransomware guys, they were working with the Ministry of State Security. That's an important advance. But the Biden administration has decided not to impose any costs on China. And we heard from Ann Neuberger, who is Deputy National Security Advisor for Cyber. She actually said to the Aspen Security Forum a few days ago that the administration decided not to impose any costs because she couldn't get our European allies to agree to impose those costs. In other words, we're saying China's violated our laws, but we're letting them get away with it. That's just unacceptable. We cannot allow others to have a veto over our law enforcement efforts.
Where do we stand with Australia? There'd been a word surfacing not too long ago that they were making closer alliances with China, and China obviously wants to be involved more with Australia in that strategic location, and that Australia at one point had started moving away from China, more toward support from India and so forth. I'm not up to speed on where that stands and what is the threat that's possible.
Well, Australia's had robust commercial sales to China of iron ore and other minerals, but China, for various reasons, has alienated the Australian political establishment, certainly alienated the national defense establishment, and Australia is moving much closer to the United States and to Japan and to India and to our friends. So this is something which is going in the right direction.
All right. Well, I appreciate your time as always. And one closing thought on this. We were talking about how they would use all this personal data stolen and have all these dossiers on every American adult. I have to ask if it's not going to start going deeper than just adults, because if they're really a long game, they're looking at kids, and we already know from some of the Confucius studies in various universities, high schools, into grade school. They want it from cradle to grave.
They're going after collecting information on minors in the United States. And they're doing it in a number of different ways, Larry, but it is thorough, it's obsessive, and for the purpose you say, they're playing in the intelligence collection the long game. They want information on every single American.
That is frightening. That's pretty hard to sleep at night with those thoughts running around when I think about it. But I do appreciate it, Gordon.
Well, thank you so much, Larry. I appreciate it.
You know what? And I want to share with the audience, I know you're traveling and you broke a trip to make sure you could be at a point where we could have a good cell phone conversation. I thank you again for that, sir.
Oh, well, thank you. I appreciate it.
You bet. Gordon G. Chang, again, you can check him and follow him on his Twitter account, and I certainly encourage you to do so. It's at Gordon G. Chang. We will be putting it up on our Facebook when we put up the podcast as well, at Gordon G. Chang. Coming up in the next segment, the latest cry for Cuomo to leave, or the cry for him to give up, or the cry that we're going to impeach you if you don't, or the cry that is not that big of a deal. I will tell you one thing about these allegations, and that's what they have to be at this point, by the women against Cuomo, and the coverage of it. One thing that disturbs me more than anything else, still to come.